but on field, when we come out, it's a big disaster in itself. So as of now, the Air Force or the armed forces are primarily into relief operations. In some parts, yes, on paper, we are involved at preparedness and mitigation, but I urge that the experience what we hold can be of a great help if we are involved at a local and a basic grassroots level. We need to carry out joint exercises in which we need to actually mobilize on ground and check the ground reality. Make our priorities. Whom to deliver, what to deliver, how to deliver needs to be spelled out. Identify landing zones in advance. If someday of some kind of a disaster I will need, then I will communication cycle, contact person, and specific relief material. Next slide. Joint courses is another issue which we need to do and draw lessons from and bring changes in preparation. I urge the organizers, we have a plethora of knowledge and information available here. I hope the important lessons will be culled out and integrated into the future disaster management aspects. Next slide. This is what I would like to say in conclusion, that this is a picture from an international magazine which they have spoken, which they have written about the Indian Air Force. And last but not the least, I want to leave you with a food for thought, that before I rest my case, I would like to ask you, whatever way you are involved into the disaster management, just ask yourself, if you are the victim, whatever you are doing, will it be enough? If the answer is yes, you're on the track. If answer is no, then you need to do more. Thank you.
Thank you, Wing Commander Ahuja, for the wonderful presentation. Lots of interesting pictures. As we all know, Indian Air Force works under very, very tough conditions and circumstances. When called upon, to respond in these situations are situations of grave crisis, tremendous kind of demand and pressure from all over, from the government, from the public, from the media, national, international. And in that kind of a situation, to carry out missions to areas which are highly hazardous, highly risky, terrains unknown, people, who do not know really how to relate. Many times civilian administration also, because of lack of, prior coordination. I can see, and I have seen these kinds of situations in my career also. So thank you very much for really highlighting these very, very critical role which is played by Air Force, and what kind of sensitivity, what kind of databases are needed to do these things successfully in a well-coordinated manner. So, well, friends, I can see that we have already, I am thankful to my eminent panelists for keeping to the time. We are just about exceeded 5-7 minutes, though having started almost 45 minutes late. I wouldn't really summarize. I think I have highlighted the important points after each speaker. But once again, highlight this basic point. I have been in this field, maybe for again 30-40 years, because right from my first assignment way back in 76 in a place called Bard in Bihar. And Bard, you all know, Bard means floods. And I was posted there, and true to its name, within 2 months of my joining, there was one of the worst floods in the suburban areas of Patna. In 75, Patna had faced floods, Patna city. And 76, government saved Patna, but at the cost of the suburban areas, you see. And I was in my first assignment in Bard. So right from then onwards, and then landing into this subject of disaster management, not by default, but by punishment. I've seen at various stages, this whole business of talking mainstreaming, you see. I think the United Nations has been talking of mainstreaming right from the days the IDNDR, the International Decade for Natural Disaster Reduction, came, of all developmental sectors, etc., because otherwise you don't address the underlying factors, the risks and all that, you see. And yet it doesn't happen. Yet today you go from one department to another department and they would say, हाँ कुछ सुना तो है, कुछ करना है, but We don't know, we don't have people who can really do this, etc. You see. And that happens because there is now a mindset that disaster risk reduction or disaster management is not my job, you see. My job is to do schooling, promote education, if I'm in education department, promote health and do transportation or commercial tax. I'm mentioning commercial tax, I mentioned it earlier also. Transport one can understand. What does commercial tax has to do with disaster management? What does registration office has to do with disaster management? What does culture, Department of Culture has to do and sports has to do with disaster management? But let me tell you, there is just no exception, you see. The registration department told me in government of Bihar that the oldest document which they have belongs to 1839, you see. And they have a network of 225 registry offices. And number of registered documents run into millions, you see. And then it struck me that all those documents belong to all of us, the people in Bihar, you see. And if a registry office was to get destroyed in any kind of a disaster, and now we are not talking of only natural disaster, after the Disaster Management Act was passed by the Parliament, the definition of disaster itself has become very, very challenging, because it talks of catastrophes and grave occurrence, etc., happening due to natural reasons, natural hazards, man-made causes, by accident, by negligence. So nothing is left. You have natural hazards, you have man-made causes, you have accidents, you have negligence. One thing which is left in today's parlance, in today's context, is environment and global warming and climate change, you see. And that is also mentioned in the next sentence of the definition, which also says, and any further activity which has adverse effect on environment. Now, given this kind of a challenge, there is just no exception, you see, be it registry office or if it is sports. You create stadiums. If the stadiums are not safe, you go to Department of Culture, you create theaters, there are malls and there are private, theaters, etc. There is just no exception to mainstreaming, let me tell you. But it will never happen till we do not think that it is first my own job, you see. And that starts with my individual and my personal context and my family context. And I believe in that be it fire, be it, electrical fire, the small accidents or whatever, we need to start practicing disaster management, in our personal context, appreciating it, be sensitive to it, have discussions about the do's and don'ts, do some practice of that, nothing like mock drills and rehearsals, etc. And then that is the solid foundation, concrete foundation to talking of mainstreaming into developmental programs. Because some friend mentioned about in the Awas Yojana or this rural employment scheme and all that. How do you do that unless until you really practice that, understand that, and you are sensitive to that, you see. So, well, friends, I think this session, I hope all of you agree with me, has been a very wonderful, exciting, thought-provoking session on mainstreaming, right from mapping to technology to smartphones to Indian Air Force to the importance of research which we need to undertake, for mainstreaming. I hope that this World Congress would lay the foundation, some solid foundation, concrete foundation, and some concrete way forward for taking mainstreaming in a meaningful and concrete way further ahead. So thanks once again to all of you, my eminent panelists, and thanks once again to all of you for listening to them. Let's give a clap to them. And well, it is 11 o'clock. I do not know if there is any time for question or answers. You see, would you kindly guide us, please, Deepika?
Sir, it's up to you if you'd like to throw open a few questions. We do have limited time, so you can decide if you'd like to ask for a few questions.
Well, Deepika, disaster management is my profession, my bread and butter, and is my passion, you see. If you leave it to me, then I am not going to leave this mic and this stage, you see.
Okay, so I'll take the mic
kindly
back
don't
then.
say that again, but I respect you and your spirit and the audience. So in case there are, not more than 2-3 burning questions if someone has on this whole mystery on demystifying mainstreaming, kindly raise your hands. We can spend another couple of minutes on question answers.
We'll give you the mic, sir. We'll give you the mic. Can somebody give him a hand mic?
Namaskar. I'm Dr.
Yes.
Kamlesh Upadhyay from Gujarat. Sir, you rightly pointed out there has to be a pair of gloves and sterilium, antiseptic solutions in kit of everybody visiting to serve the disaster area. That's small addition.
Okay, before we respond, can we have 1 or 2 more questions? Any other hands?
Any other questions?
Yes, please, there in the front row.
In
Dr. Paul, please identify yourself, and please, in case you have question for any particular panelist, please address it to him or her.
Thank you, sir. I'm Group Captain Sanjeev. My question is to Professor Reddy. Ma'am, your studies have said that, there is a degradation of the entire town or city because of the influx of people. But you see, ma'am, because of the economies of our country, the aspirations of today, the villagers, or I would say to the small towns, is to come to the big cities and look out for some kind of opportunities. Now, there will be people moving in. I don't know the figures, but I think the population, the floating population of Bombay is very high, and so is Delhi. And I'm sure it should be for Calcutta and Chennai and other places. How do you tackle the problems of the aspirations of the so-called the masses of the Indian, where they would like to come to the cities and they would settle down and they would never like to go back? So you will have this problem coming up. So what is the solution to the problems which is of this nature? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a very important question, because what I talked about also can be seen as anti-development. But absolutely, I'm not anti-development person. But what I wanted to try and bring out is the kind of development which is happening is not reaching equitably. And your point of rapid urbanization is happening across the world, but much more in India, because we are not putting our resources in the rural areas. As long as rural areas are backward and not supporting their livelihoods, so there has to be people who will come to the cities with their various aspirations, and that's when they come to urban areas, we don't provide them proper sanitation, shelters, and again you can see the development of slums all around the cities. So our priorities should be set properly so that development cuts across all sections of society, not just in urban areas but also rural areas, and development should be more equitable.
Yeah, I am Champati Ray from Indian Institute of Remote Sensing, ISRO. This is to Mr. Bhatt. The kind of maps and the satellite image-based information you provided, what I see at this moment, this is being seen as a piece of information, not really the decision-making tool. But I see a lot of potential of remote sensing GIS-based outputs as the decision-making tool. Now, what is the strategy to make these inputs at the decision-making tool, number one? Number two, we see that using the GPS and the communication, we can bring the community together. Community can provide a lot of information, actually, as Mr. Kalra said, by the crowdsourcing. So, information technology supported by the space-based information can play a major role in the decision-making. What we see today is the maps. What is the road ahead to make it really decision-making tool?
See, at the end of it, the people have to see the maps and people have to actually start using the maps. Insurance companies should be able to see the maps and able to know how much is the premium they have to put it in. It is not map so far has been kept in the hands of the few. Okay, let me be very, very blunt in this. We prepared Gujarat State Disaster Management Atlas, the HRV Atlas, which was made restricted. So that means the people cannot have an access. So unless you give access to the people, The people cannot take decisions. So make risk visible, then only people can take action. So crowdsourcing, all those techniques we can use as long as no people are, Indian people, let me tell you, do not understand maps. Very, very few people understand maps. That's the biggest shortcoming which we face because our geography teaching in the schools is very, very bad. Second, okay, the crowdsourcing, we have tried 100 crowdsourcing tools. Nobody contributes because everybody says, I want, but I won't give. This is the attitude of people. So we are doing, for Surat, we are doing a disease monitoring system which is basically able to now address in 24 hours, no, the malaria can be, we know which area is getting malaria. Okay, those sort of tools are, it will take long time to come, but we require a lot of pressure going on and having our hand open rather than closed. So maps, you go and ask for any state remote sensing agency, they will refuse to give the maps, as though it is a secret which should not be given out. Okay, unless you open your hands, unless the data is more accessible, we can go on talking, risk will not be visible. If risk is not visible, people will take bad decisions.
Thank you so much, sir. So we have taken a couple of questions as promised, and with the permission of Mr. Sinha, I'm going to proceed with the rest of the day's schedule. I would like the dignitaries, thank you for all of you for speaking. I request all of you to remain on stage because we have another very important thing scheduled. It is the launch of a publication on Asian governance, paradoxes of development being launched by NAPSIPAG along with the Policy Research Center, Bangladesh. I invite on stage for this book launch Professor Akbaruddin Ahmed, Professor Haq, Professor Amita Singh, Dr. Anand Babu, and Brigadier Vinod Datta, and Major General N.C. Badhani, HQ Northern Command. I request all the dignitaries to come on stage, please. And I will now request Professor Akbaruddin Ahmed. Professor Akbaruddin Ahmed, I request you to launch this book.
Professor Lalita Fernando from Sri Lanka.
By giving it to all the speakers on stage. Also inviting on stage Professor Lalita Fernando from Sri Lanka, who's coming from Sri Lanka. Professor Lalita Fernando. Ma'am, could we have you on the dais, please? Okay. Could we also have on stage Mr. Dilip Pitadia? Thank you so much. I request Professor Akbaruddin Ahmed to say a few words on this publication, please.
A very good morning to all of you, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I feel it an honor to be present here. This has been a wonderful experience for me. I just landed last night and participated in some of the deliberations. And I'm looking forward to participating today. This particular book is a compilation of some of the extremely wonderfully prepared research work carried out by a team of experts from the Asia-Pacific region. There's a networking called NAPSIPAC, which has been so far headquartered at the JNU in New Delhi with members from the Asia-Pacific region, and every year there's an international conference in different parts of the world. Last year it was in Bangladesh, and in connection with that, I thought it would be an excellent idea if we launch this book. And The title is also very interesting, Asian Governance, Paradoxes of Development. And as we all know, that this particular region in the world is now producing the highest growth rate. The rate of growth is the highest in this particular region. And the whole world is looking at this region. And interestingly, the Policy Research Center, based in Bangladesh in collaboration with the NAPSIPAC, has produced this particular book. And there are 12 excellent papers here. And the next volume will also be presented maybe in another 3 months' time. And the first one is in progress, which is going to be published from Springer. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your time. And we dedicated another tabloid, the Finance World, for this particular event. And there's an article on disaster law, and there is a news also about the World Congress. And I would like some of you to go through this, and to all the panelists as well. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I now call on stage Brigadier Vinod Datta and Major General N.C. Badani. Could we request you to give away the mementos for the speakers of the plenary session, please? The first memento was to the chair, and now the mementos for all the other speakers. More gifts for you, so we request you to stay on stage. Thank you very much. I will now call upon Brigadier Vinod Datta and Colonel Kapil Taneja to make 10-minute presentations each, special presentations on behalf of the Indian Army and the Indian Navy. Chair this 10-minute session, I request Professor Prasanna Kumar from MCHRD to come on stage and chair this 10-minute session, please.
Good morning, friends. We've been seeing the role of Indian Army, Indian Air Force, Indian Navy in various peacetime activities, including the disaster relief. First thing which comes to mind when there is a flood, when there is an earthquake or a huge event like that, which turns into a disaster, we look for the role of Indian Army, Indian Navy, Indian Air Force. and their their presence gives us so much of courage, so much of confidence that as a nation we can tide over any crisis. In fact, we could also help our neighbors or go far off with their support. And as people who in administration also, we look for the role of NDRF these days. But before the NDRF has actually taken in roots, we've had the role of Indian Army and Navy. In fact, many of the methods which are adopted by NDRF are taken from that of the armed forces, especially the Indian Army, Indian Navy, and Air Force. People who were in operations, the experiences have been codified, they have been taken in. The drills that are undertaken by NDRF are also based on the experiences of our mighty armed forces, who are a great support to the civilians during these disasters. So now I would call upon Brigadier Vinod Datta to speak to us about the role of armed forces as regional facets of HADR and disaster management. Please.
Good morning, everybody. I am Brigadier Vinod Datta from the Headquarter Integrated Defense Staff. We are dealing with the disaster management at the apex level as far as the armed forces are concerned. And I'll be just highlighting few facets of the regional cooperation and the role of armed forces, although the topic has been touched upon by the presenter from the Naval Headquarters. Notwithstanding that, whatever is said is little as far as the disaster management is concerned. Can we have the presentation? Yeah. Next, I'll be skipping the slides which have already been flashed or which have been discussed or which are mundane in nature. Next, not this one. Next, these everybody knows, these are only of academic interest. Next, next, next. Now, the disaster management has basically been categorized into two categories. One is the human assistance and the other is the relief work which is going on. Because the complexities which are there in the management of any disaster, so to achieve better result and to deliver the things right on ground zero, the two aspects have been divided and have been fine-tuned at the highest level. Next. Disaster relief includes your life-saving services, rescue and evacuation assessment, provision of rations. Recently, there were floods in Myanmar, and when the requisition came, it was a mammoth task to look for the rations. Then finally, it was located to a place closer from where they were being airlifted. Emergency relief. Yeah, next. Now, these are the international principles which we have. Affected state is the sovereign state as far as the disaster management is concerned. The responsibilities of the citizens, as it was brought out by Anju Sharma also yesterday, that the responsibilities of the community, because the first responder is a community. Later on, the various agencies, they come into play and they take the situation in control. But the first responsibility is to the people who are facing it, and they have to formulate smaller teams and smaller helping groups to help each other. Next. Next, this everybody knows. This is the apex level which everybody knows. Next. Next. This is the role of armed forces. Let me tell you, the role of armed forces, whether it is Army, Navy or Air Force, we work on this principle, that the safety, honor and welfare of the country comes first, always and every time. The men you command, the relation between the led and the leader in the armed forces is so intimate, so wounded closely that we have to look after each other, and that's why we are able to deliver best, not in the country, but in the entire world. Next. These are some of the HADR operations which have been carried out by the armed forces. Next. Why the armed forces are more suitable for the HADR operations. These are the bullets which are on the view foil. You can see. No doubt the armed forces are the leadership predominant organizations. Next. These are the type of assistance which are provided by the armed forces. They are in terms of survey and recce, like photo mapping and all, and various other instruments are being used. Setup of command and control, restore essential services, assist in maintaining law and order, and various other as shown on this slide. Next. Though our status as a responder is, we are second responders in the disaster management. First being the community and the NDRF, but willy-nilly we are the first responders, because when things slip out of the hands of the civil administration, we are the first ones to be called, and we are pressed into service. And it has been seen that what some of the speakers have brought out, as far as the disaster management is concerned, there is a lot which has been written, there is a lot which has been talked about, but there is not much which has been practiced. We only start running from pillar to post when there is a crisis which is hit. I would request the civil dignitaries and the audience who's present here to work on a maxim on which the armed forces work. Those who sweat more in peace, bleed less in war. So you got to practice those things in peace. Then only you will be able to deliver during the crisis. I am yet to see any agency or anybody where any kind of work audit or a failure audit has been carried out, where people or where the heads have been rolled in. Whereas in an armed forces, we have a after action report which is deliberated upon and acted upon very seriously. I would also request the audience, which is being represented by most of the organizations, to look into this matter so that the work of armed forces as well as your own organization is eased and is more focus oriented. Next. Okay. Yeah, next.